أكثر ما يقطع الأواصر بين الناس هذا اللسان. إذا أطلق الإنسان لسانه كان أخطر ممن يطلق سلاحه. فكم فرق اللسان بين الأحبة، سواء كان لسان الإنسان نفسه أو لسان من غيره يسعى فيفرق بين الأحبة. أحيانا أنت مع أخيك لا تحاسب على لسانك فتقول كلمة فينفر منك أخوك. ولذلك أصل الأدب قل خيرا أو اصمت.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So I have some notes here that I want to share with you from the wonderful Sheikh, who is just reminding us about how our tongue can get us into trouble. I've learned this a lot through the years, the hard way. And I would also argue that as an American, sometimes we are unfiltered, very curt, very blunt, very straightforward, and that can help in certain circumstances, but there's a balance, right? There has to be this wisdom of knowing when to remain silent, knowing when not to answer, right? Now, he mentioned how unleashing the tongue can be as dangerous as unleashing a weapon. And if you look at how a peace treaty can be formed because of the art of rhetoric and persuasion, you begin to see his point. And when you see how people talk when they want revenge, you can see that it's not easy to roll your tongue back into your mouth and take back what you said. And one thing I've learned over the years is how to not let my tongue fly when I am angry, because there's this compulsion of wanting to strike as many arrows into the person as possible, and man, that can really backfire. Okay, that can really backfire. And I was thinking in my own life, there's been times where someone has said something to me, and 15, 20 years later, I can still get mad about it. It's like that person just totally forgot about me. But I'm still here thinking like, I should have said this. I could have said that, right? And he mentioned another angle of how you can make people distant from you because of your tongue. And I had a falling out with one of my cousins where she had, okay, I'll give you an example. I've shared this before. But I like giving you real world examples, because I feel like that solidifies the Sheikh's wisdom. It doesn't feel so abstract, right? When it's more practical and real world, I feel like we can apply it more and comprehend it more in our lives. And I had a cousin who, she had liked this guy who I went to school with for many years. He was a football jock, very handsome, a ladies' man. My cousin was very beautiful, but she wasn't blessed up top, right? And I had to explain to her, like, hey, this guy gets really attractive women, okay? And he breaks their hearts and he leaves them. I highly implore you not to get attached to him or get too serious. Well, now you may have thought I was being really curt, but I knew this guy. See, my cousin was from a smaller town that was about over 40 minutes away, okay? And she didn't have to grow up with this guy. I was in a classroom with him from like first grade. You know, when I left to go live with my mom and then came back, I was back in high school with him. But many years of constantly being around this guy, 365 days a year, as they put it, right? Even though we have summer break. You get my point. So I knew this guy pretty well. And if some men like all types of women, they like variety. But there is sometimes you can see that when a guy rejects a certain type of woman, you can see that he has a certain threshold that you can tell that person isn't going to meet. So he's just playing with them. And that's not cool. So you're trying to protect your family members, right? I'm sure you've had some experience like that in your life. Where a guy is just a player. And you don't want your loved one to get hurt. Or take the relationship serious. Or even be in the relationship to begin with, right? And so, little by little, she starts getting really attached. She starts thinking it's real. And then, him and his guy friends, I would say that they were bullies with me growing up. But we were adversaries. I still remember his friend being like a total jackass to me in the 1st grade. Like, I can still picture it in my head how rude he was. You know? And even to the 7th grade, guy was still just a jock with a rude mouth. And I just avoided him, and I hate having classes with him. He was just always trying to put somebody down. He later went into MMA. But, man, I didn't like him at all. So, as I started warning her and cautioning her, she started getting more attached to him. She lashed out at me, and she had called me, put her phone on speakerphone, and then those guys and her just said a bunch of insults to me, and were laughing and giggling. And, mind you, I have defended my cousin. Like, one time she was getting in this fight with this girl at this festival. It was called Peach Days in Brigham City. And she was getting walloped. Okay? My cousin did not know how to fight. This chick was beating my cousin so bad that her shirt was ripped off and her bra was out and her boob was out. Okay? She was dunking on my cousin. And I jumped in the fight, and then I beat the snot out of this chick. And then I risked getting arrested. I was like, we heard someone yell, "Your cousin fights like a man." They were talking about me. And, I saved my cousin. She was just getting pummeled. Sure, I should have just let my cousin learn her lesson. But there was something about just watching my cousin just get the snot kicked out of her by a tougher girl it just felt like blood on her. I don't know how to explain it. And I knew if I didn't step in, her mom and my uncle and my family would have been like, "Why did you let your cousin just get walloped on?" And there was a crowd of people, and I was nervous about others jumping in. And so when I had pummeled this chick and got her off my cousin was like crying, hair messed up, mascara all smudged. And then I picked my cousin up, like, "Let's go." And like, we could hear the cops coming, and we ran out of the festival. And then I got her ass all the way home. And then my cousin turned around and lied to her mom and said that she had beat the girl up. And I was like, man. And I didn't even correct her. And then my cousin went around to her school and kept telling people, "I beat this chick up," and not telling the truth that she had lost. And that, and then when that girl comes back with her other friends and wants to beat up my cousin again, my cousin would come to me and ask me to save her. And then my cousin was at a football game. These girls came and poured like Mountain Dew or something on her and like bullied her. And my cousin went far away to another school. I couldn't go help her. And I didn't go help her after that. So I'm just trying to give you some context. Another time there was a boy who was bullying my cousin. We were on the trampoline. And as we were jumping, I pushed him off the trampoline and he fell on the ground and cried. And my uncle was like, "Well, at least you defended your cousin," which was his daughter. So all throughout our freaking childhood, I constantly had to be the savior of this chick. I was always risking my neck for her, always trying to defend her because she had a big mouth and she couldn't back it up. So when she had called me on the phone with people who were my childhood bullies and who were extremely rude players and not good guys, and said all these insults that I'm not going to repeat, but some of them cut real deep. Like, they were things that I was like, "Ooh, that actually hurts." And then, she later, I was like, "Hey, her tongue was so vicious." I was like, did she just forget everything we had done for her our childhood? And how she was always the cousin who was crying, whiny. She just forgot everything. Like, for example, my grandpa took us to a corn maze. I don't know if you've ever been to one. During Halloween, October month. And people would have masks and have the chainsaws, but there wasn't a blade on it, but it makes the noise. They hide in the corn maze. As you go through the corn maze after dusk, they pop out and scare you and chase you. My cousin was such a wimp that she started crying, having a breakdown, and asked us to be escorted out of the maze. She was shaking. So we all didn't get to have fun and run around the corn maze getting chased. And my grandpas were very poor. My uncle had money. And I wanted to get my money's worth, but we had to leave because she was a crybaby. So everyone always had to do what she wanted to do because she was the spoiled Angelica, Rugrats Angelica, crybaby. Every time she was around, it was like, you know, we always tried to include her. She was always causing trouble, you know? And she was burdensome. But I never excluded her. And I never ever told her how annoying she was. How I was glad when she wasn't there. Okay? Held my tongue. Even when she did that to me, called me in on speakerphone with those guys, I was like, alright, I still didn't unleash. Then, one day she's like, hey, I'm going to come out to San Francisco. I'm going to bring a present for your daughter when I only had one kid. And I was like, maybe. But I didn't believe she was actually going to come out. She's the kind of person who will tell you she's going to do something and not do it. So I didn't really believe her. She got to the Golden Gate and was like, hey, I'm on the Golden Gate. Text me your address. I'll come see you and whatnot. And I was like, no, I don't want to see you. I hadn't forgiven her in my heart. She was like, what are you talking about? Because she was out here to visit a friend. It wasn't like she just came out only to see me and then I ghosted her. No. She was coming out to see other people. And then I thought about how precious my daughter is to me. And I thought to myself, this person doesn't deserve to meet my daughter. After everything I'd done for her, risking juvenile hall to protect her, physically putting my safety on the line to defend her. Like, she had gotten me in some precarious situations more than I'd like to admit. And I couldn't. Until this day, that was years ago. That was like, at least 10 years ago. I haven't spoken to her since. Okay? And you may be telling me right now in your head, forgive, but you don't. Sometimes distance is the best thing, but when the Sheikh is talking about how dangerous your tongue is, I think about that example with my cousin, you know, because he later broke up with her and went and like broke her heart and she was shattered. Then when he broke her heart, she comes back crying saying, you were right. And it's too late then. It's like she trusted him more than me, and she knew him less than me. She knew me longer. I knew him longer. But because he's handsome and her hormones are taking over, and it's like she just got that fuzzy brain, and you may be thinking to yourself, oh, just forgive. No. When someone shows you their true colors, believe them. I mean, this chick, I ain't trying to backbite, but there was times where she would name drop me at a party. Be like, you know my cousin Luan? They'd be like, yeah. You know, oh, she's really good at fighting this and that. And then they're like, oh, you're her cousin? And then she's like, yeah. And they're like, oh yeah, your cousin beat up my cousin. I'm gonna F you up. And then she's calling me at 11 p.m. at night. So-and-so wants to hit me. They're part of the Norteños. They want to hit me. And I'm like, you shouldn't open your mouth at the party. Don't name drop people. You don't know who's there. Okay? And if you're not about that life, don't mention people's names. You know? She always was the one. She was the damsel in distress. The one who loved to cause trouble but didn't want to finish it. You know? And I recall one time, because my grandparents were struggling with money. And my cousin, her dad had wealth. He would buy her $200 pair of jeans, fancy shoes. And she would brag about how much her clothes cost. And she would always tell me, like, you're a different kind of beauty. Because she was blue-eyed, blonde hair, right? And I was brown hair, brownish, copperish, highlighted hair, and brown eyes. And she would always try to put my beauty down and elevate hers. She was just that type of a very nasty person. She was doing cheerleading and dance. I was doing more, basketball, outdoor stuff. And so we were different energies, right? But she was always that kind of a woman to try to put you in your place beauty-wise, to brag about wealth, to be very selfish, okay? Like, for example, we would go to a carnival, her mom would give money, but she would spend the majority of money on what she wanted to eat, and then would not really give me something to eat. And I would hate her for that, because if I'd ask my grandpa, can we go to the carnival? So I can't pay for your ticket, you're gonna have to ask your cousin. Like, we were struggling. And she didn't have that charitable heart. She wasn't like, with my other cousin, I had a cousin, her name was Tasha. She got addicted to crystal meth and went insane. But before she turned into a drug addict, she was chill. And like, we would just walk around during the summertime and just talk and hang out. She was someone you could just vibe with. She didn't drain your social battery. And you didn't have to police your speech around her. We played basketball. We would just have a lot of fun. Totally chill. But with this cousin, my cousin Kylie, oh my gosh. I mean, I would just not like her very much. And she was a complainer. Like, nothing ever appeased her. Nothing was to her standards. And so the tongue, it's not just about insults, but it's like how you don't read the room. Even my neighbors, because I was blessed to have neighbors who were in the same age groups as me. Or very close, right? 2 or 3 years apart. And we'd all be playing, back in the days when kids actually played outside. And then they'd be like, your cousin Kylie's coming over? I'm out. Like, they didn't want to deal with her. And I'd be like, no, don't leave me alone with her. And even my grandpa, he was really chill because he could tell that I didn't really like having her around. And so he would never, overly force me to go see her ever. And he would always let me go over to the cousins' houses that I do like. Remember, my grandma has 10 living siblings at that time, who all had kids and who all had other grandchildren. So we were quite a large family. So I didn't lack in cousins, But I would, be going with my friends, with my cousins. But I still, to this day, remember those insults. And that's like a wound. Like, they say that time heals all wounds. Yeah, I could say it definitely heals. But let's say if I take my kids to go see my grandparents, I would specifically request that my cousin Kylie not be told, because it would ruin the entire vacation. You know what I mean? Like, if she came over, I'm going to remember everything she said, and then I'm going to, she's like, I'm sorry, cuz. And it's like, actually, sorry doesn't cut it, Get away from my kids. Like, she doesn't have any kids at her age. She's 30-something. So, it would just feel awkward, It's just really strange. But I've learned a lot from studying Islam about knowing when to control your tongue. If you recall, when Habib and Conor McGregor were going at it, one of the most remarkable things was how Habib held his tongue at Conor. I was so fascinated by that. Because I was like, when I grew up in Philly, partly in Philly, you had to watch what you say because people die every day over something they said. Like, people will literally put you 6 feet under for some slight that they perceived, that they can't let go. So you watch it, but at the same time, when you were being, clowned on, you had to come back swiftly to the point where you shut that person down. And if you exhibited any sign of weakness in body language or speech, they just pounced on you like hyenas. They didn't stop. So public school makes it so that you have to be verbally salty and really aggressive to the point where people don't know if you're going to go left or right. then they back off and leave you alone. But if you're polite and nice in some public schools, you're going to get eaten alive. This is why so many young girls who are polite, if they go to a bad public school, you know, they cut themselves or they hurt themselves, unfortunately. Because they can't handle that level of verbal and physical bullying. So girls learn to be actually more tough when it comes to those situations. And the tongue sometimes can cut deeper than the fist, you know? And women are really good at this. Women are very sophisticated with the tongue. Now, if you look at bureaucrats, they got speech. Businessmen, right? They know how to negotiate a deal and, you know, persuade you to invest in their company. But women know how to say things that get under your fingernails, that'll replay in your head over and 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 over until you get into a rage. So this wisdom he's sharing with us is very beneficial, because learning to remain silent, I still sometimes struggle because I feel like it's a weakness. I'm like, I could say something to you. Oh, I could put you in your place. Then I'm like, don't. The fallout ain't worth it. Like, oh man, it's difficult. Super difficult, because sometimes I want to be harsh with someone because they're not doing their job, or they keep ignoring and they're not doing something right, or they said something bigoted, and I'm like, oh man, it would feel cathartic to put them in their place. But again, knowing when to be potent and when to be silent is an art. Truly it is. Truly it is. But he also mentions how we must be accountable for what we utter. That's true. Women will say things and then they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. It's okay. Yeah, no. No. You don't get off that easy. It's like if you shank someone and they're like, sorry, I didn't mean to. Well, so what? The wound's gotta still heal, man. I gotta go to the doctor. You're gonna pay for that. And, you know, the wound has to physically heal, and I'm gonna remember where you shanked me, man. And so the tongue, being like a weapon, is very similar. Like a husband can say something to his wife that it cuts so deep that you're like, okay, now it's time for revenge. You see that? She may forgive for a little while. She ain't forgetting. She tries to forget, but it comes back in her head. I remember you said this. I remember you said this. I remember you said this. And then suddenly, 5 years later, do you remember when you told me this? And the guy's like, what? You still talking about that? That was so many years ago. She has it right there, as if it was just yesterday. That's what's crazy, is that women can have a memory where you're like, yeah, you said this light to me. You said that. I remember that. And it's a wound that they carry like stones in a backpack. And that's why I think we have to be very cautious. And sometimes some people are overly sensitive. That's another thing I've learned. Like, sometimes you'll just speak normally to people, but you'll disagree and they can't handle disagreement. That's another thing. There's like, I had a content creator who I used to always follow, now not as much. But if someone disagreed with him in his chat, he would just ban them. Like, he couldn't handle the slightest pushback. He would berate them, insult them, and then when people would attack him, he'd be like, oh, you just can't handle this, or you just can't handle that. But I started realizing he berates them with his tongue very viciously. These people get scorned because they felt they had a bond with this content creator, and now they want revenge. And it's like a never-ending cycle. So you gotta really be careful with how you correct people, and that's a hard art, because sometimes people deserve a little bit of their sassiness back. You know, but some people, they just can't handle it. It's really quite odd. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and help us to learn when to remain silent, plead the fifth, just kidding, and how to forgive, but also how to know how to keep your distance from someone when it's deserved, because you keep letting that vampire back on your throat, it only hurts you. Well, it rejuvenates them. Let me know what you think. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Join the blog.